Hi everybody, it's Tracy here again, this time from my garden on what is a very beautiful and sunny day. So this week I am working with the theme of my environment, my place, my planet. And as it is such a beautiful day, I am using my garden as inspiration for the artwork that I'm going to demonstrate for you today. So for that, you're going to need some leaves, and so I'm going to pick some of different shapes and sizes from my garden, and I very much hope that you're able to do the same, whether it be from your own garden or indeed a walk in the park. So I'm going to go off and make my selection just now, and I will see you all back here very soon. Stage 1, watercolour printing. You will need some watercolour paints or watered down paints, some brushes, some water, some salt or some rice, a mixture of leaves, some thick paper, some scrap paper and kitchen towel. First of all, just put a layer of water across your thick paper, and then you can work across whatever colour you want. So I'm working with cool colours here, so working with blues. And just spread your paint right across the full sheet of your paper. So it'll be very wet, so you need quite thick paper to do this. And you don't have to be too careful, just plop down all the colour that you want to work with and spread it about your wet paper. I'm adding wee touches of red now, so you can do whatever you like. So working with the leaves that you have found, start to press them into your page, just decide where you want them on your paper, and then just soak the back of them with more water or colour, and just work your way around the page, adding leaves and adding more watercolour as you go. This soaks into the leaves and helps them really come in contact with your page. So using some fern now, I'm just pressing that into the wet paper, and you'll see that there's a sort of halo of white appears around the leaves. So that's fine, but what you want to do is get your paintbrush again and just make sure that you just dab on some more colour, just to make sure that there's a lot of colour all the way around the leaves that you've just put down on the paper. So don't worry that your paper's really soaked at this stage. And now I'm going to sprinkle on some rice, because this gives a really nice effect on watercolour too. It'll create some sort of dots and marks. So I've just continued on through the page, adding more leaves and dabbing on more colour as I go. So it's a very loose way of working. Again, I'm sprinkling a wee bit more rice on this piece. And now I'm just going to set this piece aside and allow it to dry. So starting another, so again, and this time I'm going to use the hot colours, so working with reds and oranges. So again, you want a really wet page, and just layer up lots of colour. I'm blending in some orange now, but you can use whatever colours you want. But be careful not to overdo your colour choices, because then it becomes quite muddy. So I'm sticking with quite warm colours, a wee touch of green though in the corner here, and just blending things, but just soaking the page with colour. So selecting leaves again to work with and just pressing them down firmly into the page, dabbing on colour around the leaf. Selecting some more, so this nice fern again, I'm just going to use parts of the leaf and just arranging them on the page wherever I feel. So again, dabbing in more colour. So everything's very, very wet at this stage, and that's absolutely fine. But you want to just make sure that it's a nice layer of colour around the leaves. So we're just going to continue pushing on more, just making my design on my page. Adding a wee bit more colour with every leaf. And now selecting another leaf, pressing that in, and again dabbing colour around and on the leaf. This just helps with the printing. So I've continued on, filling up my page. You don't really see your results until your page is entirely dry, so just have a bit of fun and just enjoy placing the leaves and don't worry too much. So I'm just making sure that all of the surface has a bit of detail with the leaves, and then dabbing on the colour on top and round all the leaves again, just making sure that each of them have enough colour around them, because this will really help your print show up. This time I'm going to try some salt. So again, like the rice, where you sprinkle this on the surface of wet watercolour, you get some really nice effects. And again, you'll see that properly when the piece is dry. So just sprinkling it wherever I feel. And again, I will allow this piece to dry. So this piece is just going to be a watercolour piece. So I'm just making backgrounds now for adding layers of printing on later on. So I'm just enjoying plopping down loads of colour, spreading it around. So again, I'm going to do a cool sheet. So just covering the whole sheet. Not having to be too careful about how the paint's been applied, but just making sure it's very wet. And for a wee bit of interest, I'm going to add some rice. So just sprinkling that on the surface. And you can see how the paint just disappears when you put the rice on it. And I'm going to sprinkle some salt. And again, the salt just bleaches out the colour where it lands as well. So this will give a really nice effect when this is dry. So I'm just going to keep that very simple, just like that. I'm just going to let that dry. And that's going to be a background to work on. And I'm going to do another one, this time using the warm colours, so using the oranges and reds. So again, just spreading the watercolour across the paper. Not being too careful, just enjoying, playing about, pushing the colour around, letting it blend till you've completed the whole page. And just moving the watercolour about. So you can play about with this. Just make sure your surface is really nice and wet. And again, I'm just going to use some salt, sprinkle that on the surface. And again, you can see the colour just bleaching away where the salt lands. So when that dries in, you'll have a really nice effect. And again, this piece will be one that I work on later on. So I'm just dabbing in a wee touch of green. So again, you can do whatever you feel. There's no right or wrong way to do this. All I'm doing at this stage is creating a kind of interesting background that I'm going to work on top of. So just sprinkling some colour on the top, finishing that off, and then I will set that aside to dry. Now you need to leave everything to completely dry, so be patient. Everything is completely bone dry here. And when everything is bone dry, you can start to peel off the leaves, and underneath you should find that you have a really lovely print of whatever leaf that you've been working with. So just gently peel it off, but make sure your paper is bone dry when you do this, and you will see how your prints have all turned out. So that's turned out really quite nice. So now I'm just going to scrape away all the rice that I put on this piece as well. Just making sure everything that I put on the surface of the paper is being scraped off now that everything is dry. And there you have your finished piece. So again, this is just one of the backgrounds. So for this piece, it was salt that I used. And I'm now just scraping away the salt. Sometimes it can be a little bit tricky. Some of it stays on, but that's okay. But again, you've got a nice sort of textured coloured piece here to work on. So stage 2, adding printed layers. For this you will need some paper, a selection of your finished pieces, some paints, so this time thicker paints, some sponges, a selection of leaves, some bubble wrap if you have it. So I've popped down some paper underneath my piece because this can get a little bit messy. So I've just used some newsprint to protect my table. And now I am printing with leaves in a different way, so I'm applying paint to them. So it's a thicker paint that I've got here. And I've just dabbed some on the back of this leaf, and then I'm going to push it into the paper, and I'm just going to use a scrap of paper again, just to rub and make sure that the leaf has pressed down before peeling it back to reveal the print. So this is one of the backgrounds that I made in the previous bit of film. And again, I'm just using the same leaf and I'm not applying any more paint, so I'll get a slightly lighter print. And just peeling that off. So for this part, you're just playing around with various colours, various leaves, painting the back of the leaves, printing them, just placing them and deciding where you want them on your page. And you're building layers. Some leaves print better than others, so it's a lot of experimentation. But you can keep going and build up many, many layers. I'm introducing lots of different colours into the piece now, so now I'm using some pink, and I'm using one of the tiny leaves from the fern, dabbing on some pink, and then I'll just place this and push it onto the paper, and then peel it off. So you can continue this part for as long as you like. It's all about you deciding when you think your piece is finished. So again, applying more paint, pressing it down into the page again, and peeling it back. Now your fingers will get a wee bit painty, but that's okay. Just make sure your table is protected. So I've got a slightly different leaf this time. And I am going to apply some paint to the back of that. So I had one largest sponge and I cut it into smaller ones, which means that I've got a lot of sponges for all the different colours I have. So if you can do that, or if you've got more than one sponge, then that can be really good, because it means you can easily change colour. So I'm going to pop a piece of paper on the back of this and give it a rub to make sure it's in good contact with my page. And then peel that off. That's a really nice print. And adding a tiny touch more paint. And then popping it down again. Giving it a little rub on the back before I peel it off to reveal the print again. That leaf prints really nicely. So trying out another one and trying the pink again this time. So just dabbing it on. So you don't want your paint to be too thick, because if it's too thick you won't pick up all the very fine details of the leaf. So do make sure to sort of dab off some of the excess. So I've skipped ahead here. So I've just continued on with that, building layers and spattering a bit of paint on. You can continue to do this for as long as you like. I will work into that piece again. But I'll move on to another one, which was one of the printed pieces that I did with the leaves before, that I'm going to add a wee bit more interest to. So again, just dabbing on colour onto a variety of leaves. I'm just going to print on top of the printed watercolour leaves and just see what happens with this. So I don't really have a plan. I'm just working as I go. rubbing the back. Just make sure it's in good contact with your page before gently peeling it off. So it gives a slightly different type of print and another texture and another layer to your piece of art. So just painting up the same leaf again, printing it in a different spot, and then peeling it back off. So just enjoy the process of building up the layers and choosing the colours and choosing where the leaves are going to go. The results are really unexpected because you don't really have an awful lot of control. You're not entirely sure how it's going to turn out until you peel it off, but that's kind of part of the fun of doing it. So again, just popping some scrap paper on the back to give that a little press down. And then just peeling that back. That's a really nice print. So I'm going to use the same leaf, I think. And I'm just dabbing the excess paint off my sponge, but this time I'm going to dab around the leaf, so it'll give it a slightly different print again, so you'll have a bit of a silhouette of the leaf. So experiment with this. Try lots of different ways to make marks. So I'm dabbing all the way around the leaf and then I peel it off and you've got a bit of a silhouette of the leaf and also a little bit of a print of the leaf because that still had paint on it from the last print I did. So I've skipped ahead again and this time I'm going to use some bubble wrap. So apply the paint on the sort of bubbly side of the bubble wrap just so that you pick up the dots. So again, don't have it too thick and press it firmly into your page before peeling it back and you will have some lovely dots that will have printed. So again, this is just adding another layer, another point of interest on your piece. So again, I'm not thinking too much about where these are going to go. I'm just working around my page and just making decisions as I go. So filling in gaps where I think would work nicely for a sort of additional bit of interest. So thinking perhaps I need some more printed leaves. So going back to that again, choosing a colour. So this time I'm going to work with a sort of purpley colour, something a wee bit darker. And again, I'm working with one of the wee tiny fern leaves because they print really nicely. And just popping that beside some of the bubbles that I've printed as well. So again, I'm just making choices and decisions as I go. So that's worked out really nicely, that print. It's just something a wee bit darker. So you can just decide what colours you want to use, how many prints you want to do of the leaves, if you want to add some bubble prints, if you want to add some sponging, if you want to add some speckles of paint. It's just all about you making your own choices and just building up layers until you think that your piece is finished. So dabbing on a wee bit more colour onto that fern leaf again. Filling in some more gaps on my page. Giving that a wee rub before I peel it back. And so now I've just using some paint, but I don't want it to be too thick, so I'm just dabbing off some excess on my scrap paper there that I've put down to protect my table. And I'm just sponging some colour on now. I just feel that it needs a wee bit of definition around the edges. So just gently sponging on colour. So you can try this too in any areas of your page you think might need it. So my sponge is quite dry. I don't want thick paint. So I'm just working my way around the edges here, just adding a wee bit of definition. And there you have it. My layered print. Hi everybody, thanks for staying tuned and watching the film. I hope you've got a wee bit of inspiration from today's activity. I certainly have enjoyed this process, and after I stopped filming I've continued to work into some of the pieces that I was working on. So here I have just repeated the process that I demonstrated in the film, where I've printed more leaves and printed more bubble wrap and sponged on colour to a point where I feel now that this is finished. So it's all about building up layers and getting to a point where you decide that the piece is finished. Equally though, this piece that I demonstrated with the watercolour printing, I simply peeled the leaves off of the dry piece of paper, and I was really happy with how that turned out as it was, and so I'm now deciding not to add anything to this. So it's all about decision making and you deciding when you feel a piece is finished. Another thing that I've experimented with was how to display my finished work, and so I've tried out using a stick that I gathered from a walk and some twine that I had at home just to hang the piece from, and it's created a nice sort of wall hanging piece. So I think the stick works really quite well with the subject matter of the leaves. I think it complements that quite nicely. So this is something else that you could experiment with too, if you like. But of course, if you do have a go, I would absolutely love to see your results. So please do, if you can, post them on our social media for all of us to see. That would be fantastic. And in the meantime, I really do hope you're all staying safe and well. And I'm looking forward to the day that we all get together and see each other again.